We are the hub for news, results, and CEO interviews focusing the junior commodities sector. We provide market analysis and perspective that will help position you for solid returns.
Happy Friday, everyone. We're getting closer to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, which is next weekend. I think it starts on Sunday and Monday. That should be quite interesting. But since we're talking about our friends in Davos, kind of talking about a lot of these topics, a lot about climate and whatnot, and what we can do, I thought we would take a quick jump back into some of the great work that people are doing out there, specifically, about carbon capture. Now, that whole carbon capture sector is not only a bit controversial, but it's also it's a big sector that involves lots of different technology. The obvious one, and I'll just kind of throw it out there right at the start, is you're able to sequester, like an oil and gas company or even a coal company could sequester their carbon and store it underground. Now that would give them an offset. So you can see this carbon neutral or offset, which is great, because if you're concerned that it's the carbon is the issue, then great, you can sequester it underground, and that's fine. That, of course, it's interesting because, say you're a coal company or an oil and gas company, someone on the left will say, no, that's not good enough, because it's not just about the carbon now. Now you have to stop drilling, you have to stop using oil and gas, we have to stop using fossil fuels. That's then another layer of argument, which becomes a little bit more interesting, but we won't even delve into that. But it does, you start wading into the politics of the entire movement as well. But there is that line between, oh, well, we can sequester this underground, there are options here, but immediately you'll get resistance from people saying, no, that's not, we have to do the renewable approach, which, of course, as far as I'm concerned, if we could have a full cycle, full renewable, and it worked, and energy, that is something we should aim for. Why not? As us who are, very pro mining, that's wonderful. That's great. Like, let's just give it a shot. And that's what we try to do here, is keep people kind of, on that level playing field of acknowledging the politics side of this and the alarmism to the practical, and also what are some of the good things that are getting done out there. And right now, we've talked a little bit about one of the key components when you're talking about carbon emissions is cement. And at first glance, you'd think, well, that's kind of boring. I mean, cement, look at all the buildings that use cement. I mean, not just foundations for homes, but I mean, any city, and never mind like a giant city like Shanghai or Hong Kong. Look at the amount of cement needed for that. It's shocking.
Yeah, to the amount that's needed and the amount of energy and cost that's going to go into that. Obviously, then there's going to be companies looking at solutions and looking at ways to get around that. And I think that's why, like, this carbon capture technology has taken off so much in the cement industry, and why it's so popular. Not only because we've talked to Progressive Planet. We're going to talk about a couple other companies today that all kind of fit this mold, but it's a way to help meet these targets while also, reducing emissions, and also creating a good opportunity to raise capital. Anything that's going to be involved with renewables or any carbon sequestration is going to give you an easier avenue to raise capital, and you're going to be able to hopefully utilize some government opportunities there as well, to kind of boost your business. So it makes sense from a perspective of, hey, if we can do this in cement, then a lot of cement companies are going to start looking in this direction.
Yes, and I think, especially having gone to FarmCon, and there was quite a bit of talk about carbon capture into soil. There's a lot of microbes. There's a lot of things we can do with ag tech that is truly exciting and interesting. And, carbon is a building block of life. So if you can capture more in the soil and help the soil to become richer and more nutrient dense, not a bad thing. And we wanted to kind of focus this too, because there was a CNBC article where an analyst says, expect under the radar global carbon capture stocks to soar by up to 65%. Now that's a huge plug that it's great. So someone goes, oh, well, yeah, under the radar. That's hard to find. but also that's a huge rate of return. And we see that there are so many funds out there, and private equity, general funds. I mean, BlackRock has a fund, Vanguard has a fund, but also Biden's infrastructure plan. There's tons of grants and funding towards solutions, and we're seeing some of those money being released into different projects, and some of them have a lot of promise. We're looking at. We talk about Progressive, and I mean, this what we love about Progressive is that they're already ahead of the curve on all of this. They're currently making what I like to, I think it was even Stephen Harper, the CEO, had said Roman concrete, and there's a specific type of strength to that concrete that's impressive. And what we want to do is just mention these other two, not because we work with them or anything, but just to give a sense of there's a lot of companies now paying attention to this. Called Brimstone Energy, and the other one is called Sublime Systems. They're both in the U.S. Both got very impressive management on them. The Boston one, which I believe is Sublime. Yes, they just raised $40 million, which is a nice raise, and they're focused strictly on cement. And it's great to see this, and we wanted people to reach out and look at this. There's other people out there that are working hard to solve this issue, and believe me, people know in the last 6 months, 2 years, you want to get even just cement. If you want to order cement, not easy.
No, it absolutely is. It's a very difficult industry, and there's only a select number of providers, especially in Canada. There's only a very limited number of suppliers that you can get. But for a company, we'll start with Sublime. Let's dive into that one first. They're targeting being at a kind of commercial scale plant size by 2028. So they're planning on getting there with this raise that they've currently done. I know they currently have just a small facility that can only produce, I think it's like 100 tons of low carbon cement annually, but they're working to scale that up and bring it to a very large market. And I believe one of is it the CEO or the vice president's a guy who was involved at MIT for a number of years and stuff as well. So clearly some very intelligent people involved in the process. And it's a very, very interesting company that, when they talk about their new solid mixture of reactive kind of silicon concrete, you add water and gravel to this chemical reaction that they have in place, and it creates a sequestered version of carbon. It's a creative approach, but it's nuanced. It's similar to what we see with Progressive Planet doing, but kind of a different angle on it, but cool nonetheless. And interesting, I think, to see a company that is diving into solving this problem in a slightly different way, but in the exact same sort of space with dealing with concrete.
Yes, and that's what we wanted to highlight, is that there's lots of smart people. Like you said, Leah Ellis, who's the founder and CEO, PhD from MIT. I think she also went to Dalhousie, which is kind of cool. So there's a Canadian connection there. And then the other founder and the CSO is Yet-Ming Chiang, who also studied, he was a professor of material science and engineering at MIT. So both, definitely great pedigree, very smart, who are also tackling this. Because if you remember, I think cement is about 8% carbon footprint on the planet. Put that into perspective. We'd mentioned on Wednesday, Great Britain or England, Wales, and Scotland are less than 2%. Canada is somewhere less than 1.5%. So we like to remind people of that, not because it diminishes that, the role that we should be playing, but it puts things into perspective of where should we be focusing our attention. And, we should be focusing it towards that 8%. Really, China is around 20, right at 20. That's massive. And of course, the US is very high up there at, I believe, about 16 or 17%. But if we could tackle that 8 with some solutions, that's incredible. We look towards not only the US and these bright minds, but like I said, Progressive, they've got Harvard scientists working with them as well. I don't know if they're ahead for sure, but we're definitely going to have an interview with them, and we're going to bring up both these companies and see where they're different, where they're the same. just because it's interesting, but also just we want to highlight that there are lots of great innovations happening that are getting some kind of, some news out there, but it shows that people kind of forget that when they're building out these models and these doomsday forecasts, that there'll be no innovation. There'll be nothing coming about between now and 2030, 2050. And right away, we can see that there's a lot happening on a very positive scale to help tackle this and make cleaner, better living solutions. And why wouldn't we want that?
No, exactly. Like that's the more companies that are getting involved in this, the better, honestly, because there's going to be, as you can see, like we've gone through sort of 3 different companies here that all have a different approach in how they're doing it, but to all get to the same end goal, which is carbon capture, reducing emissions. So when that's the beautiful thing about kind of what we'll advocate for a lot is an open market and investment opportunities in these companies, and then a boosting of government dollars flowing towards these kind of companies as well. Is it gives an avenue for a bunch of different solutions to rise out, and then the best ones are going to be the ones that rise to the top. But if money's flowing in the right direction, it's going to create tons of opportunities to grow and change and look at all these different solutions and how they might be applicable. And certain solutions may work better in some areas than others. Certain types of concrete can be more effective. I know we've talked with Progressive about the concrete that they work with ZS2 on, and how like that would be so ideal in places that deal with a lot of wildfires because of how resistant to heat it is. Now, you may have another company that could have a different type of cement that's incredibly resistant to, water erosion or something like that. And that's the really cool thing to me, is that they're all these companies are coming up with different ideas to get to the same end goals, but the products could end up looking very different while still kind of checking all of these boxes along the way.
And also, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because the Progressive one, it's full cycle. Like, it's solving a number of problems. It's not just the cement one. It's the fact that with the pause glass, with what they're able to do, is they're going into recycling areas where, you send your glass, your empty beer bottles or your olive oil bottles, when they're ready for trash, you put them in a separate blue box, or maybe it's a green box where you live, gets picked up and it's taken to a separate place. That then becomes sandblast. I think Steven said about 20% of it, but the rest of it is just kind of thrown out. They can take Progressive could take all of that glass and actually use it and put it back, so fully recycle it, put it back into cement. So not only are you solving a wastage or dumping of glass, you're also putting it into this new product, capturing some carbon, solving a bunch of different problems, and keeping it very cyclical.
Exactly that. And another cool kind of time between the companies as well is you can notice at the bottom of the article here, we're looking at Sublime. Professor Chiang says that Roman cement is the proof that you can make this, you can do this, which is, if you go to our website, or if you head over to our YouTube page and look at the little 5-minute video you and Steven did together, Steven says the exact same thing. He's like, the proof is in Roman concrete. That's what got our brains kind of thinking about this. Yes. Now, the Romans were doing it in a different way, but again, getting to the same result at the end. And that's what I find so cool, is that both these companies kind of looked at that as an example and said, hey, we can do something similar to this while tackling all these big goals that we have as well.
And what's fascinating is the interaction of different industry. Like, part of our cement, and a key factor is that one of the ingredients comes from the kiln or the making, or from mining of coal. You need to have that ingredient to make cement. Well, they're phasing out coal at a rapid rate. So that means great. I mean, I think most people say less coal is wonderful. They're certainly not phasing it out in the third world. So make no mistake. And we've touched on this before. They're not necessarily even pushing for them to stop, which kind of makes you wonder what's going on. But if we're just focusing on us, you go, okay, well, where are you going to get, once you shut down all these coal mines, where are you going to get that additive to put into the cement to make it stronger? Well, what's the solution? That's something that's a pressing issue that's coming up rapidly. And there's a huge demand for that large segment that will be taken away, which is great, because we now have a solution with Progressive, and perhaps this Sublime as well. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on quite quickly is what you'd said before too, is that different regions will have different solutions. I think when we look at whether it's the electric vehicles or we look at carbon sequestering, whether it's in soil or whether it's actually storing in salt caverns, whatever it happens to be that you're doing, you'll have different tools on your tool belt. And one of the interesting ones, we're not going to go too deep into this because it's very science heavy, but there is a SciTech article talking about being able to store it in different oceans and in the water in the sediment, which is also, I think it's called SciTech Daily, a very interesting concept that, once again, specifically, this is looking at Iceland. It's a carbon conveyor belt. Once again, this is another that may only work for a certain specific area, just the same as if you don't have access to geothermal, if it's not there, well, don't try to make it work. You can use another solution. If you're in, say, somewhere like BC, where there's not a lot of sunlight sometimes when solar may not work, there'll be other solutions. It doesn't have to be there's one, it fits, and that's it. And I think when people see the amount of work that's going on to develop solutions, they'll be surprised at the pace that people have been working behind the scenes to work on this. And once again, take the carbon out of it and say, let's just remove that argument. If it just makes the air cleaner, if it helps to make water cleaner, if it helps to make concrete a bit cleaner, hey, that's great. And it's really focusing on new technology into the old, leveling it up, and also creating an entire new sector that, believe me, is going to start booming soon. And that's that entire carbon sector.
It is for sure. And you can already see that with kind of the amount of government dollars, both in Canada and the United States, that have been earmarked towards projects like this. And that's going to continue to go. I mean, I would expect to see a number of companies get some pretty solid government grants over the next few years that are targeting these same kind of solutions, simply because that's where the narrative is moving towards, but also because that, it's a smart, sensible investment on the government side to say, hey, look, we're moving towards meeting these targets as well. We're helping companies that are working to address it. But you make a good point as well with talking, different regions are going to have different solutions to this. That they need to, because we're not that far apart in distance. But the massive kind of difference in when I'm out in Vancouver and the amount of electric vehicles that you see versus here in Alberta in the winter when it's minus 30.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you're going to have the exact same type of vehicle running out in your guys' climate as you would have here in the middle of winter. It's not going to work. Good luck getting your battery to hold the charge in minus 30. So you're going to have different solutions and different applications. But that's the really exciting and fascinating thing about it, and why it's awesome to highlight. We can highlight 3 different companies that are all doing the same thing, but have different ways of going about it. That's what's fascinating and gets you really excited about the potential for growth that just this small sector in the grand scheme of global emissions has to grow and change over the next few years.
And it also it gets you into that nuanced conversation where on both sides, people will use the argument of, electric vehicles won't work in absolute cold and it's this and this. Like, okay, that's kind of true, but there's a lot of hot countries in the world. So maybe it's a hybrid, or maybe it's a hydrogen hybrid that we use in the cold where, okay, no big deal. It's keeping people off these extreme edges of what media wants to push and go, let's focus in and go, listen, there's going to be lots of cool solutions. There's going to be lots of changes, but a lot of them are positive and huge sector growth. And I guess the one thing I'll say before I finish up and wrap it up is the farmers that I met with in Kansas City are quite up to speed on carbon, on some of the options that they have with carbon, and specifically with their land. And they were kind of hinting that the Canadian farmer isn't as up to speed, and not because they wouldn't know any better, but because Canada's really kind of far behind on all of this. Is my one thing I'd say to any Canadian farmer, if there happens to be one or one, is don't sell out right now any long-term agreement for carbon capture into your land in any way, shape, or form, because I think the value that you're going to get a little bit further down the line here is a heck of a lot better than what especially any government's going to offer you right now, because they see this carbon capture in all of its forms is going to be a massive, massive business. So if you're involved in ones that are solving the cement problem, which is that 8%, we're talking that's an astonishingly sized number. So that's going to develop no matter what. It's going to develop. It might develop in uncomfortable ways. And we had hinted before that, these digital currencies are coming. There's good and bad with it. That's another conversation. But, with my one kind of imaginary tinfold hat look in the future, your carbon footprint is going to be embedded into that digital currency as well. And I think by 2028, they'll have gotten you either used to that idea or that you're really for that idea or that's positive. But I think that's where it's heading. And that's how big an industry the carbon sequestering, carbon, whatever in every aspect of it is going to play in our daily life.
Yeah, it's going to take on a massive amount of focus, and like you said, there's going to be a lot of dollars involved around it as well. But it's a great conversation to have. It's a great to look at a bunch of different companies and say, hey, they're all got different strategies, but there's lots of people that are targeting onto this, hitting on the same kind of theme, like, hey, sequestering into carbon or into concrete, excuse me, and that's the really exciting aspect of it is you can see the dollars that are flowing towards this. So there's going to be opportunities for people to capitalize on it on a number of different formats. But I think we'll probably wrap it up there. I'll do my classic shameless plug at the end here. If you guys haven't already, like the video, subscribe to our channel. It helps us immensely. The more you can help us grow, 2022 is huge for us growing. So if we can continue to grow at that rate, I mean, we plan to grow even faster than that. But even if we can just keep growing at the rate that we have over the last year, going to be really exciting. Our message is reaching more people. We're having great conversations, and we're looking forward to tons of opportunities in the year ahead. So if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, head over to our website, give us a follow over there. Greatly appreciate it. We'll be back next week with some more great conversations. Looking forward to it. We'll chat to you then, Andrew.
All right. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.